Hello, everybody out there in internet lands. Oh my God, I've done too much talking today. Welcome to the Land Down Under Hangout. Tonight we are discussing my pick, which is Blackwater Sister by Zen Cho. Woo, and there's the second cover. Both of them beautiful.
The third cover.
Yeah. Oh, well, there you go. I had a hard time picking between the covers, honestly, when I bought my copy. I was like, I don't know which one I want more. So absolutely beautiful books. Okay, so let's start with what people thought. Kirsten.
I quite enjoyed it. I did the audiobook and I found the narrator to be really, really good. I found her really easy to listen to, and I really liked the way she characterized each of the characters. Like, it was really easy to tell which character was speaking and all of that kind of thing. And I liked the way she gave the kind of right cadence to the way the grandmother in particular was speaking. I really enjoyed that. It was a little bit dark, but not so dark that I didn't want to keep going. But I can probably get into more detail later. But yeah, I enjoyed it.
Elizabeth, you had your hand up?
Yeah. Quick question. Do we know who the narrator was?
I can't remember off the top of my head.
Okay, that's cool.
Find out.
Sorry?
It's the same narrator that narrated Gear Breakers, if anyone remembers that. The same narrator.
All right. Elizabeth.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I read it on holidays down by the beach where we're in the forest, and while it's not exactly tropical, it did have a little bit of the vibe at least, and so it was an excellent read for that. I enjoyed it quite a lot, and I was impressed with Zen Cho's flexibility as a writer, because this is quite unlike her other works that I've read. And yeah, on the whole, enjoyed it.
Lisa.
Oh, I think Kirsten had a finger up.
I was just going to say narrator was Catherine Ho.
I know that name. I think she's done a few things. Nice.
I really enjoyed it. I especially enjoyed it for personal reasons, in that I am currently living with my wonderful mother-in-law, who is Chinese Malaysian. So I felt like the characters in the book and the story, like I shared parts of it with my mother-in-law, and I also asked her questions about it, and I felt like it gave me a little more insight into her culture. And I did enjoy the book itself and the story. So yeah.
Awesome. Bobby.
On the whole, I actually really enjoyed it. I don't think it's this specific one that I'll read again, because I felt like there were the bits that were intense were so intense that it wouldn't be like a comfort read like some books kind of tend to turn out to be. But I'm glad I read it. I really enjoyed reading it. I did the audiobook as well. I struggled a bit in the beginning because I did not like Gear Breakers, which was an audiobook that I did, and because it's the same narrator, it sounded a lot like that one of those characters that I did not like in Gear Breakers. But after a while, I was like, oh no, it's okay. And I agree with Kirsten that if you struggle with reading the text bit, go and get the audiobook, because they speak Malay English, and she obviously writes Malay English for a lot of the characters, which is fabulous. But it means if you're not used to that, or if you don't tend to be easy with picking up things, certain linguistic patterns, listening helps a lot, because the inflection she puts in, it's a lot easier to absorb some of those like quirks of Malay English. So yeah. And I mean, the other bits I'm happy to get into more detail. I suspect we'll probably talk about them later on in the hangout.
Awesome. Naomi?
I also enjoyed it. I also listened to it and quite enjoyed the characterization and vocalization of the narrator. I was actually thinking today that this book is a very firm, like 3.5 stars. Like, I wouldn't quite give it 4, but it's definitely not a 3. Like, I know I've given it 3 on Goodreads, but it's not really a 3, but like I wouldn't quite give it 4. So it's like very firm 3.5. Like, there are parts of it that I'm like, this is a really good book and I really enjoyed it, and other parts I was like, it's okay.
Sarah.
Hi, sorry, the cat showed up, so I had to mute myself. So I wrote some notes because I wanted to remember this. So if I said, and I'm not trying to, hopefully this doesn't offend anyone, because I'm a big fan of this genre, but initially it really reminded me of Chick Dick Lit, which is short for Chick detective literature, which I've read a lot of in my time, and it really had that feeling and that vibe. And I was really I was just like, I'm enjoying this. We're experiencing a culture. This person's, and please remind me, I actually finished this a few weeks ago, so I'm not remembering everybody's names. So if you could remind me what everyone was called, like I don't actually remember the protagonist's name. I just really enjoyed this kind of look into this world that was also, she was a stranger to, and so was experiencing at the same time that we were. And it was a mystery, and I like a mystery because that's really at the heart of it, what it was. So I was really kind of going, oh yeah, I'm getting real Stephanie Plum vibes and kind of Kinky Friedman and all this kind of stuff. And then the midpoint came and the grandmother possessed her and tried to kill this guy. And I was like, oh, okay, there we go. Okay. So, and we kind of, and then the genre, like it was this really great mashup of basically these two genres of, this, detective literature mixed with, I guess, thriller kind of stuff, like thriller meets supernatural type stuff. And it was really, I thought that was actually really well done. So I'm with Naomi. I think I might have given it 4 because although it's definitely not as good as some other 4-star reads, I thought the writing was really good, and I thought I was long for the ride. I didn't do the audiobook, which I know is unusual. I actually managed to get a copy from the library and it was amazing. I know, right? And it was really good. And reading, actually, I thought the way that it had been set out, I don't know if it's the editor or the writer herself, but it was really easy to understand the intonations. And I don't know, also being if we're down under and such integration with different Asian cultures and immigration and stuff, but I didn't have any problem understanding the different, I don't know how you said it, Bobby, but the ways of speaking and the those different things. I was like, it was really kind of comforting to me. So I enjoyed it. The end didn't quite stick the landing, but yeah, so that's where I'm at.
So I enjoyed this, but I did struggle to read it. I kept putting the book down and not wanting to pick it back up again, not because it was bad, but because of all of those moments, especially in the first half of the book, where I'd just be like, oh, please, I'm very uncomfortable. And on the back of my copy, there was a quote from, I think, another author. Yes, an author. Who's Karen Lord, where she said, this is both an ode and an accusation to all the ties that bind to family, duty, and home. And I thought that was an excellent quote for this book, because that's really what it's about. But also that ode and accusation at the same time was, I think, is a very, very poignant way to say what this book is trying to do. So I really quite appreciated that. I think I appreciate the book more in the finishing than in the process of the reading, though, is where I sort of landed with it. It was very difficult to read. I think somebody said they couldn't reread it. I agree. I don't think I'll ever be rereading it, but I'm very happy I read it. And 3.5 stars, most likely. I only finished it this afternoon, guys. I was like, oh God, you've got to actually finish this book. It's your pick, Melanie.
I finished 5 hours of it today just because we had an issue where I fell asleep and didn't set a timer, and David couldn't stop listening and could book 2 days ago. So, and I woke up to the alley pseudo rape scene. So that was exciting. It was at 4 a.m. I actually woke up and it was still going. I was like, oh shit, I'm not sleeping now. Great.
Yeah. Yeah, that scene was really full on, and I was actually
probably the one piece of all of the violence and uncomfortableness that I actually really think she could have just not put in there at all. Like, they could have just had them being violent with her, and they didn't need the rape element.
Yeah, that was a lot. And yeah,
I think
Yeah.
I think it didn't bother me because somehow I just thought it's not going to happen. Like she's going to get rescued.
That was
There
the
was
only
just a
thing that got
feeling
me
of-
through it. Was I was
Yeah.
like, she's gonna kick all of their asses before anything happens. But it actually
or at least
went
armor
further than I thought it was going to. Like
Exactly.
I thought she was going to get them before it even got to that point, and it was like, holy shit, this is like, Grandma, where are you? Fucking
Yeah, armor, come on.
Yeah. Yeah, but I kind of saw what it was from a structural point of view, which is kind of why I was saying it's like it's basically the stakes had to be raised another notch, and it also, you know, so, and you needed to believe she was kind of in some kind, you know, in real peril there. It was the crisis point basically.
I don't think you could take it out really. Like,
yeah, so that's how
that crisis point.
Yeah, the only thing was, and this might be the thing, is that I think a lot of you listened to it. Those Mel, you read it, I believe you read the physical copy. I know others here, like I know myself when I've heard things, and you can't just kind of like absorb the words as you go. Whereas I think I'm going to be honest, I think that's a little bit why wasn't as bothered, because I could kind of I'm just kind of taking in the scene. I'm not having to sit here and listen to it. So I can imagine Bobby waking up to it and going, that would be quite bad.
I think you're right, because when it's something like that in a text, I can kind of skim it, and I can also kind of tune down the visualization in my brain.
Exactly. Yeah. You can kind of
dial
it back a bit. Yeah, because they're already the world they're building with their the voice and the emotion probably being packed into it at that point. Yeah.
Well, that's why I didn't go for the audio, because I actually had the audio from my library as well, and I was planning to use it as a backup. And pretty much what the first time that she gets possessed happens like at about page 20, and I was like, oh, I'm already very, very uncomfortable, and I do not like this. I've literally got notes here of me going hello, not liking this. And I was at that point, I was like, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do this book in audio at all.
Actually, I did a combination.
That's what I was planning to do. Yeah.
And come to think of it, that scene I think I did read rather than listen to. So that maybe that's also why I was able to go, I think she's going to get rescued, you know. Yeah, so it didn't bother me as much as it might in a different context, like in a different story. Yeah.
I mean, I did expect that she would get rescued, like that it wouldn't go that far, but I saw it was like the waking up to it, not expecting it, and also there's a lot of emotion packed into it. The narrator does a great job. Does a really good job with all of her work in this book. So
Well, Elizabeth mentioned like her change of, would you call it a change of genre? I'm not sure. It's still fantasy.
No, Sarah mentioned that.
Sarah, sorry.
I said, yeah, so there was so much.
No, you were talking about something different. I was talking about the author from her previous books.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Oh.
Yes, it is quite different in that aspect.
But I do think that one of the things that did carry through from, at least I've only read two, I've read two of them, one a novella and one a novel. Sorcerer to the Crown, I think it was.
Sorcerer to the Crown, yeah.
Yeah. One thing I think she does very well is she writes those sort of really intense scenes very well, so that you're very feeling it at the moment. That's one thing that I think she does exceptionally well. All right, shall we talk about characters? Let's go with Amma.
What a character.
Who decided if I liked her or hated her?
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
It was
I feel like it reflects
from one to the other.
It reflects the emotions of the protagonist in that sense, I think.
I totally alternated between this is an amazingly strong woman and what a cow.
I actually was questioning myself at some points, like, did she even like her granddaughter at all? I
feel like she didn't know her granddaughter. Like,
no, she was a tool. She was a tool. And I think once it was discovered, can someone please remind me what the protagonist is called?
Jess.
Jessamine.
Jess / Min, right?
Jessamine.
And Min from her family. Yeah, thank you. Sorry. I think it's also because that doesn't happen a lot where people, refer to themselves, because there was all these pet names. It was like, Who's called who? Yeah.
Oh,
like
and
she
it was
didn't-
also, sorry, it was doubly confusing because when they refer to it as Min, they spell it M-I-N instead of
Yeah.
M-Y-N.
YN. Yeah.
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 Oh, so is it spelled M-Y-N? Because I did audio, so I just thought it was Jessamine. I thought it was
Yeah, that's why I thought to mention that, because that was one of the things that it took me a little while to actually realize. I knew they were talking to her, but I didn't immediately catch on to why they were calling her Min.
See, I had to ask, this is where I asked my mother-in-law, like, you know, like, what is kokoa and kodio? What does that mean? And she had to explain it to me, that it's a relational, a way of referring to your auntie on your father's side.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Right.
Father's
Madam
side.
Lauren,
Oh, she's correcting me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bobby knows a little bit probably about this from her Nordic background, because it's very similar, where you like far more and more is for, you know, grandfathers and mothers. Yeah, I can't remember all of them. Yeah. But yeah, so I also did a lot of Googling, which was helpful, but it was also kind of like, it was like, oh yeah, no, this is familiar. No, this makes sense. So, anyway, what I was going to say about her was when Jess discovered that her grandmother was basically heading up a gang of gangsters, like she was kind of a mafia, I was like, oh, this suddenly all makes sense. You know, like, it was like, oh yeah, you know, Jess is basically a tool. She's used people as tools to get what she wants. But you know, that background of it was also really interesting. She's become hard through necessity. But that's also made her hard, you know, and used people through necessity because she herself was used, and you know, yeah. So
Yeah. And
was
suddenly
just-
it made, sorry.
No, go, Kirsten.
I was just going to say, suddenly it made complete sense when you realize why her mother had nothing to do with, like, Jess's mum
Yep.
had nothing to do with her own mother, because you're like, oh yeah, no, I get why your mother's like, I'll just,
yeah,
I'll
it was
just put
such a
on
good
the
mystery
family
box.
and I know that's a culture
Yeah.
anyway, like taking, you know, being closer to your husband's family than your own and that sort of thing. But I was like, yeah, I can see why you've kind of cut your mum off, because, yeah.
Well, she just used everybody, including her son, you know.
Yeah.
So
I felt sorry for him.
yeah, I really did too. I felt sorry for anybody who became a tool of the gods. It sounds like just the worst curse in the world. Like that poor guy who like ended up with the monkey god.
Oh yeah, that was a bit rough.
Yeah.
But I felt like with coming back to the idea of whether or not she loved Jess or not, I actually felt like it didn't really matter how much she knew her, because I feel like she would have used Jess's cousins just as happily and just as much regardless. I'm not sure that she would have she was letting anything stop her doing what she wanted to do.
Yes, I don't think it mattered. All that mattered was that Jess was a medium. That was all that mattered. It wouldn't have mattered how much she loved or did not love her. All she cared about was that she was there and she was a medium.
But the interesting thing I thought was that there's a lot of she does a lot of the things that I think culturally a lot of those sorts of grandmothers would do as expressions of love.
But I mean there was, and I guess I kind of got it because I've seen a bit of that dynamic and but part of it I think was an expectation on Emma's part that she could do that because Jess is her relative. Like there was, and her granddaughter, and it's like, no, you owe me kind of thing.
Yeah,
like
you're in service of your elders. That's what you are here to do.
There was definitely, so there was almost like it's like your duty, you know, because her reaction very often was one of, oh, how can you talk to me like that? Like, have you forgotten who I am? So
yeah. But the other thing I was thinking is that she sometimes says things to her that remind me of Everything Everywhere All at Once, in how she was saying things to her that was coming across to her daughter as insulting and mean, but was actually her expressing her love.
Or concern at least, anyway.
I noticed.
Yes.
I was going to bring that up actually. I thought there were quite a few parallels between this and Everything Everywhere All at Once. I mean, clearly that the whole dynamic being about mothers and daughters relationships, and the fact that the daughter's gay and her mother's reaction to that and everything,
and that coming from two different cultures and living in a different culture,
like
from your mother
being not really part of one world and not part of another.
I mean,
I think that thing where parents like criticize their children isn't though just a thing that's to Chinese Malay culture. I think that's all over the planet in all kinds of cultures. I've got friends who have those kind of strained relationships or didn't realize that's what it was. Like, that was their way of like telling me they cared because they're noticing me, but what they noticed, who was them noticing my flaws, not, getting the praise that I so desperately craved. And so it rang true for me in lots of different ways, which is nice. I think it was nice to sort of have this. There was so much in this which I really enjoyed, like this insight into Chinese Malay culture, but also there's just universal themes across humanity, right? And that's I think why we're talking about this is like, this is a 3.5, 4-star book because there's so much that resonates.
Admittedly, there were certain things, especially Jess's decisions that were prior to the story itself, that clashed with my Western brain so much. I was like, I would have just stayed in the US and let my parents go back to Malaysia and I'll come and visit you.
Yep. And also like her fear of coming out as well.
Yes.
I thought, I think that was a lot to do with the culture and her worrying about her parents. And I think that was interesting, the interesting reaction from her girlfriend, because I don't think her girlfriend really understood how difficult it was for her to come out to her parents. And I think I kind of could see it from the girlfriend's perspective, like why that was so frustrating to her, because she's like, you're always trying to hide and pretend that I'm not actually your girlfriend, because what if you randomly run into someone in the street that then tells somebody else that then tells your parents? And so she, I get how that would be really, really annoying after a while.
Yeah.
But also I could see from Jess's point of view of why she was so afraid to come out to her parents. It was like, I could see both of their points of view.
Yeah, and there were some stakes there with her dad and what her mum had basically been through and not speaking about, but leaking out her eyes with. I know Naomi's a big fan of this movie, The Happiest Season, which is a Christmas movie. And there was, and there's this really beautiful scene, spoiler, where the, I've forgotten his name, David from...
I know the character you mean, I can't think of his name.
Yeah. Anyway, he's speaking to Kirsten Stewart's character about her girlfriend who's in the closet with her family. And you said, it's okay that you're not okay with it. But you also, it's okay that she doesn't come out yet. And it's this kind of thing of like, you might have to be on different paths. And I did kind of think that. I was like going, I think you're stringing this poor person along. I thought that a lot about Jess. Is like, she's on a different path now. She's moving on with her life. She's out. She's proud. She's going to Singapore. But you might just have to let this go if you're not ready,
But not only that, there's a way to not be out to your parents and not hide the relationship. Like you don't have to be like out to your parents to be like, this is a person that's important in my life. Like, they don't have to know that person is your significant other. But if you want to try and make a relationship work without having to come out to your parents, because you're not ready yet and no one is forcing anyone to ever come out, that's your journey that you need to make. But there is a way for you to introduce that person as someone important in your life. And you should be respectful that if you do want to try and keep that relationship, you need to try and be like, okay, how do I balance this in a way of this person is important to me and I want to include them in my life, but also explain to them, like, I I want us to be in a relationship, but I'm not ready to be out with my parents.
Yeah.
And like, yes, that is a very difficult. And if you're not willing to be the person in the relationship that is the person that is out and your partner is not, then that's okay. You don't have to be okay with having a partner that's not out, but you also can't be mad at them for not being ready to be out either. Like you just need to decide that this is not a relationship that's giving me joy and let it go.
I think that was one of the things I liked about the book, was that it was really easy to see both of their perspectives. Like it wasn't like, yes, this one's right and this one's wrong. I could totally see it from both of their points of view. And I was like, oh, I get where you're coming from, but I also get where she's coming from.
Yeah. And then they're adding the complication. She's now living with Core, you know, a hardcore Christian lady. And I was like, I know a little bit about Christian values here. I'm not sure this is going to go down well, you know.
Especially because they definitely seem to have very traditional Christian values.
Indeed.
I see a lot of Mrs. Kim from Gilmore Girls. Oh, sorry.
I want to come back to that, what we were saying about Core being Christian, but before then I want to say, in terms of Jess and her girlfriend, I was totally cool with the Jess's I'm not able to come out. I was actually really angry at Jess for not sharing what she was going through with the being possessed by Amma with her girlfriend. I felt like, now that feels like a betrayal of trust. Like you're saying she loves you, you love her, you trust each other and share stuff with each other, but you don't trust her enough to tell her that, like to talk to her about this is going on. I actually got quite angry about that. Like I was like, I feel like you should be trying to have that conversation with this if they are.
It made sense in the course of the story for two reasons. First of all, it was supernatural in a world where, in an experience that both of them had where that didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be, without her being present, it would be very hard for her to have accepted that this was actually happening to her and she wasn't going insane.
Yeah.
But second of all, it also matched the arc of the story really well, which was very much, I think, more than anything to me, it was kind of a coming of age story for her, because she was essentially she was growing up in the process of all of this. Not growing up, that's the wrong word for it. Finding herself in the process of all of this.
Yeah, maturing. That's a great word.
Maturing. She was maturing during the process of this. The moment when she got the haircut and she was just like feeling herself, and she was like all of that moment. And then the fact that it ended at that moment where she was coming out to her parents, I think was so pivotal as the point to end it. We didn't even get to see what happened because that wasn't what important. What was important was that she'd reached a stage where she was willing to do it finally.
Yeah.
Just as a quick aside, I love that she went to all the trouble of getting the haircut that she really loved and it didn't work. Like it was totally useless. She might as well not have bothered, but she really loved it anyway. So
I think it worked in a way that it gave her some confidence that she wouldn't have had otherwise. Like it didn't work as a disguise, but it worked in that she kind of
I love the way she did like the research to figure out like, how am I going to get in and do this without like having to like look silly with a disguise? Like, and she found all this FBI stuff on how to distract and all of that. I was like, you go, girl, you going in and figuring out how to do this. Exactly.
I was laughing because I was like, I know the video she's talking about because I've also watched that video.
Of course you have, Sarah.
It's a good video. But I also thought when she was going through that in that moment with how do you say the grandmother's name is
Amma.
It almost kind of brought them into sort of some equal footing and kind of seeing eye to eye on it, because also Jess had some real stakes on the table there, you know, like it was about her uncle. Like it's not just this dead woman's revenge, it's her uncle and her cousin, and just, you know, so it's kind of like, okay, some real, like the stakes were being raised, and I just, I liked that. And also I felt like, maybe I'm misremembering, but I felt like Amma really finally got a little bit of respect for Jess in that confrontation scene too, which again was a nice maturing of like, see, you good girl.
I wondered if that had to do with her being chosen as the medium for Blackwater Sister, and maybe that had put them on a level playing field to each other in some respects.
And I think it also kind of forced her Amma to let go a little bit and accept that she's not the only badass in the family in a way, because like Amma was always like, oh, but like I got the impression that Amma thought, well, I was the medium for a god, so obviously I was the one who could hack it the best in the family. And then here we are with, you know, like the daughter of not even her most beloved child, right? Her most beloved child was her son, not the and that's the one who ended up being chosen by the goddess, like handpicked by the god. And
but also she's my family, so I want her not to be doing this because it's not a good thing to be doing and things like that as well.
I think it was Amma to kind of see her as more of a human thing, because once she'd been through that herself, she got used by the god in order for the god to find and get her hooks into Jess. And then the fact that kind of as I think her suicide kind of leveled them out a bit more.
And I think that's the final big maturing moment really for Jess, is that moment where she resolves the situation with her being a medium for Blackwater Sister herself by calming the spirit and having her pass on. And if that's is that a reasonable definition of what happened at the end?
Yeah, I think so.
She's sort of taking it for a resolution for that.
So basically that maturing moment and her managing to do that, I think, was probably the final sort of respect and elevation with Amma in some respects.
I thought it was really, I just was just reflecting on those two moments where, for two women who basically want revenge, and she kind of says, she helps the Blackwater sister let go and say, it's okay, it's done, it's over, you know, it's he's not going to hurt you anymore, you don't need to seek this revenge anymore. And then with Amma, she kind of calls her and said, really, this is what it's all about, have you heard yourself, woman? And it was just great, because again, they were at that equal footing, and I just and Amma's kind of like was almost like a little bit, you know, shamefaced about it, kind of like, you know, and trying to like, okay, she's right, like this is a bit ridiculous. And then it comes out, well, it's actually, you know, about there is a love there for her son and wanting to protect her son from this. And you're like, see, maybe you should have led with that.
Sorry, Lisa, I think you said a bit before that you had something you want to talk about.
I wanted to go to the scene where Jess, her mum, and Kokoa are in the car, having come from the Monkey King gods, and they're like, okay, well that didn't work, and then Kokoa's like, okay, well, we'll go to the priest and we'll organize the exorcism, but no, she has to convert to Christianity. Yeah, well, we'll organize that. And Jess is like, do I get a say in this? That was such a funny scene, because it was like, and I could appreciate this, because I remember having a conversation with my husband about, I'm Jewish, is this going to be okay, you know, with your family, sort of thing? And Chris was like, listen, any religion is good with my mum. And I thought maybe it's a cultural thing, whatever, but it was just the coolest scene, because they're like, well, we're going to fix this problem and we'll just find a religious way to do it. It doesn't really matter which way. Just like, I don't want to be a Christian.
It reminded me actually of being in Japan in some respects, because they're just like, oh, you just go to whatever religion is right at the time. They were doing the same thing in this story as well. Like, we'll just go wherever it is that's right for doing this. Doesn't matter if it's the normal spot. We're just going to get something happening here.
I thought there was such a good explanation of that, kind of going, oh, all gods are valid. And then there's the spirit gods, and then there's the big gods, and, you know, they've all got a place. And I was like, okay, I thought it was this really nice insight into how this all, how it kind of like, But
sorry, also, I liked, like, there's a really good explanation for why Coco is a dedicated Christian. Like, it's not that, you know, she it's not like a random thing, sort of thing. Like, there are good reasons why she is the way she is, and I liked that also came out.
Can you remind me what those reasons were? I've forgotten what they were.
Well, I believe it had to do with, like, Blackwater Sister and, like, that whole situation in the family as well.
I think she said something about, like, you can come to my church, and and my God will just, you know, be baptized. My God will just take care of all of this nonsense. Was basically what she was saying. She's like, you don't have to do any of these things because you can just come and pray over here. And the monkey, the guy who was the medium for the monkey, was like, you think I would choose this if I could walk away? I would walk away. He just didn't feel like he could.
Going back to Jess's mum, I actually thought it was a particularly interesting moment when, like, she didn't actually say it at that moment, but Jess reflected on her mum saying how much she was jealous of Korkor's relationship with her daughters and how they talk regularly and everything. And she said, I just wish you would talk to me and tell me all your things. And that double-sided thing of, you've established this as how we talk, how we deal with each other because you don't tell me things.
Mhm.
I just thought that was so beautifully done. Like, it wasn't a hammered down point. It wasn't something that she like went deep, but it was just such a telling moment of Jess and her relationship with her parents, and especially her mother. I thought that was just so beautifully done.
And also how, like, Korkor's relationship with her children is kind of undermined as well. Like, she really loves her children and that sort of thing, but like it's not a perfect relationship by any stretch of the imagination. And
No.
they use it to kind of outline like the family's issue, like homophobia and that sort of thing, to kind of like underline why it is so difficult as well for Jess to come out. Like, it is a big deal.
Yeah,
It's not just going to be something that is like smooth sailing through the family.
No, but overall, just thinking about all the characters are like that. Everybody is like grey. Nobody is like perfect or good. Everybody's got like all of those little different elements, down to the bad guy. I don't know how to say his name. Hin.
Shirang.
The developer.
The big guy.
His father.
In the audio, I think they said Chi-hin.
Yeah,
that's why I said I don't know. I was reading the book and I don't know the pronunciation.
And I haven't seen it written, so I only know how I heard it.
Yeah. Thank you. So Chi-hin, even he sort of like had elements where you could see that he was like not completely bad sort of element. His son especially was very great, but
that was a really interesting character.
He was very naive, I thought. He's so obvious. It's like, oh, I can totally take care of this. Like, because I'm kind of in this position of being able to do it. It's probably always worked this way for me before. I mean, he was not flat. He was a very dimensional character, but it was like he just kind of had this, for me, this very strong, but just naivete about him, about like how he thought he was going to be able to handle his relationship and carry on this relationship with Jess after everything, and how he thought going and talking to his dad was just going to solve the problem. And
I wrote down a question about him.
Is it Shirang? Shirang, is that how you say it? Yeah, Shirang. Thank you.
Yeah,
those who did the audiobook.
So I said, was he blind to his father's act out of filial necessity, as in, I just have to ignore that my father does these things because I've got to just survive that he is my father? Or is it just like a cultural numbness? He sees it so much that he just didn't see it as being that bad what he was doing.
I thought it was more the second one. Like, I think it was like, it's just the way things are in Malaysia kind of thing. Like, you know, there was a few things like with her coming from America being, you know, you can get in a taxi and the person who's driving the taxi is the mafia person, or the police are not trustworthy because they're, you know, all of that kind of systemic stuff. I think that they're used to it, and she's coming from America and it's a shock.
And that's the other thing. Well, I wasn't sure about that as well, because I was also like, my own Western lens is perhaps prejudicing me in that respect, and I don't know Malaysia well enough to really know.
Yeah,
like,
same. Yeah.
Look, I think it's the same everywhere. I think there's corruption in every police force. You know, I just watched yesterday this thing. I've never watched a Friendly Geordie's video in my life, and I just watched
that the other day too.
40-minute expose on about the New South Wales deputy guy, and it's like, you know, everybody, like, it's just like, you know, the regular Joe dealing with the regular police doesn't have any of this, but there's people in power who can make things just happen, or people disappear, or turn people to their whim. That's here in Australia. So I think it's everywhere. And I think just Jess probably in her small world just was never really exposed to that in America. And then somehow she gets involved with one of the most powerful men in Penang.
She's also quite young. She's only just out of university. And like, I don't think my world experience was that. Like, I know that you're an adult and everything, but yeah.
There's a difference between being an adult by age and being an adult.
Yes.
I don't think I'm the second one yet.
And I thought there was a bit where I think you were just talking about it before, Bobby, about where Shirang was like going, I can talk to my father and everything. And I thought the author painted him so well as that entrepreneur of like, I can fix it. And then when you kind of like, it's just all bravado. And then really understand.
And naivety as well.
Naivety, but like actually going, like he really wants it to happen, but it's not going to be like, I'm going to go in there and set the truth. He's just still going to do it in the very safe, in the way that he's always dealt with his father, which is probably a very much like a respectful thing. Because it all kind of came out at the end where he's like, I don't like, and this was kind of the thing. And I think probably maybe Mel, everyone doesn't have control over their own lives in this. This was a major theme of this novel, which is nobody has control of their lives, whether life just comes and, gives you cancer like her dad, or whether you become a medium for God or your bloody grandmother, or whether your father is like the most powerful man and basically is told you that you will be taking over this business whether you want to or not, right? Nobody has control over their lives. And
and the grandmother and her situation
she did not have control over her life, and the Blackwater sister had no control over her life. Like this is reoccurring theme. And what happens at the end, where we see in the resolution, is that Jess takes control. She says, I am going to do this is what I'm going to do. And and it's great and reassuring. And yeah, there we go.
On the topic of the uncle, did we see that coming? Because I didn't see it really coming. I
put that a mile away. As soon as we
should have seen it, and I kind of guessed. Yeah.
Well, do you mean who the uncle's father is?
Yeah. I when it happened, I was like, of course, this makes total sense. But I hadn't pegged it before it happened. So
it took a couple of steps for me. Like as soon as they were like, oh, she was pregnant when she left, I was like, she was not pregnant with her husband, like with her partner's kid. That's somebody else's. And then a little bit later, I was like, oh, and it's gonna be that guy. And it was before it was revealed. I did pick it before it was kind of a two-step process for me.
Yeah.
And since we were talking about Shirang,
yeah,
Air Asia, and I knew it was him. The moment I was like, that's that guy. The moment he turned up,
which is
I was
actually
like,
a good way to refer to him, because I want to mention this bit when she first went to his cafe. These quotes got less to do with him and more about like how I just related to this quote so much. She's standing in the cafe and she thinks she found it also appealing. She felt faintly manipulated. I have felt that so many times when I go somewhere. Be like, oh, it's a cafe that's got books on the walls. Oh, they did that because that's going to appeal to me. It's got nothing to do with anything in the actual cafe.
It's just, marketing.
Marketing and, creating an ambience so that people feel like this is a place I want to be. And I was like, oh, yeah, they do that to me.
I see it happening, and yet I can't stop it.
And yet I will still come back here because I'll take this over the lack of it or the ambience I don't enjoy.
I know I'm being manipulated, but I kind of like it.
Well, pretty much.
As long as like, I don't mind if I'm being manipulated to like a place, as long as the thing that I'm getting at said place, like if it's a cafe with books on the wall, as long as the food or drink is to standard that I want, I'm okay with being manipulated by liking it with the nice stuff on the wall. Because if there's another place that is the same standard of whatever I am receiving as a service, but it doesn't have the same like books on the wall or video games or whatever I'm interested in, Like, of course, I'm going to go to the place that gives me the gives me the ambience that I want, even if it is a manipulation. It's fine.
It's giving me happy vibes. I'm happy while I'm having the thing that I'm really enjoying at the same time.
I mean, it's not hurting anyone.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
I had actually when they were talking about Sharing's cafe and how much it was for a coffee at his cafe in ringgit. And I asked Lucy, and she said, "Oh my God, that is so much money. Like, you would never pay that for a coffee in Malaysia, in Penang."
That part was like, for me, I'm like, I have no idea how much that is. Like, that made me.
I'm glad you had a reference for that, Lisa.
I did. It was like, it worked out to like, I don't know, like $14 for a coffee or $12 for a coffee or something. Yeah.
Oh,
Wow.
So yeah, it was like, and because I had asked that question, I thought, I think there might be some money laundering going on there.
You're really paying for that ambience now, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting when Shirang was also talking about the temple and wanting to do something with it, because I didn't necessarily object to that idea of reviving somewhere, because I was like, having met the spirits, I was like, I actually think the spirits would love that, to have new people, new vibe. You know, there's an opportunity for offering someone that people are looking after their area. But then, of course, he kind of, like typical entrepreneur, pushed it too far into like, you're going, oh, no, it's just capitalistic. Yeah, this isn't like a good community co-op. We could make like everybody happy. No.
He's still the son of a developer.
With not nepotistic streaks. So yeah.
Should we talk about the possession elements of this, specifically the non-consensual possession?
Yeah.
No, sorry. Just back up for a minute.
Sure.
Sorry, still percolating through. I wonder, like, if that is like a like the idea about the capitalistic use of the temple space is kind of more of like a Western ideas of like separation of material and spiritual.
I was thinking a little bit more along the lines of so when I was going to go to Singapore back in 2020, and hopefully one day I still get to go, I wanted to go visit the columbarium. So Singapore is a land of very little land, and they basically took, which is something that sounds very similar to what they were basically clearing in Penang, a whole lot of jungle land with shrines and whatnot, but also burial plots and mounds, and so they cleared all of that to be able to put housing up. And then what they did is then they created a columbarium and have they basically forced Singaporean people by and large to embrace cremation, whereas before, through many of its cultures and religions, burial was the traditional and understood route. And so this columbarium sits within a park, which is for the residents of the surrounding apartment blocks. And it's there, and it's a place that people can visit to visit loved ones and make offerings, and in any way you would normally go to grave sites and do that, and spend time with your ancestors and in a spiritual sense for the different holidays and whatnot. And I just was like, everyone here knows me and knows that I'm interested by the death process and grieving in general. And I just thought that was kind of this really beautiful way. And that's also run by a cooperative, like it's all cooperative, this piece of land that's left, and it's run by a cooperative of the people who live in the buildings and trustees and all this kind of sake. So hearing how that capital, like we have to build things for people to live in, condos kind of thing, but we also know that one of the things that attracts people to live places is they like a lot of green open space, and a way of we still also need to do something with all of these bodies. It seemed like a really good way of meeting these two worlds, and that's what I kind of started hearing from AirAsia to begin with, but then he kind of kept pushing it a little bit too much down the hole. I'm like, you've kind of forgotten there's shrines here, and that is God's here. Like, if you kind of put more of that into it, I think you might have something on. But you seem to be really fascinated by people eating and partying and drinking.
Yeah. Look, I don't disagree there, but think that it's like it's a good idea to interrogate like knee-jerk reactions to it.
Yeah. And as I said, I was on board to begin with. She wasn't. Jess wasn't. I'd like to point out Jess was like, oh, and I was like, hey, hear him out.
And I think that he did have a point in that it was like, well, it's kind of the lesser of two evils. That was his kind of argument, was like, well, something's gonna happen. It's not gonna get preserved. It's gonna get developed in some way. Isn't my way better than what, like, completely bulldozing the whole thing? And that was the part that was like, yeah, I can kind of see where you're coming from there, like the inevitability of something happening.
And I think that that's a good point too, like that the term compromise is a big part of what everything that's resolved in this story, like almost all of it happens through some sort of compromising process to find some sort of middle ground. So perhaps that's was a big part of the messaging of this, is that we all have to compromise in ways.
This is a very mature way of looking at the world. The black and white part, it's a very mature way of looking at the world.
Well, I think that's
a hard line.
Yeah.
I mean, there's times when that's important and stuff, right?
I think that given that a good part of the story was that story arc of her maturing over time and feeling her Wheaties, that compromise is a big part of that maturing process, and a good part of it was her finding ways to compromise. That makes a lot of sense, because that's something we all have to do, and it's not always black and white and very clear which way we should be doing it. So it's not always clean.
Can someone explain to me, because I felt like I missed it a little bit at the end. So she got the job in Singapore. I felt like they glossed over her telling her folks, because I actually felt like her mum would be really upset that she was leaving. I don't know why.
That was where they ended it. Like, she was about to tell them, and then there's
no, she's about so they
I got the sense she had actually told them she was going to Singapore. But
they didn't go into it. It said that she it took some persuasion or something, but her parents agreed to let her go, basically. Like,
right, yeah.
All that, and the ending, it finished on what she was just about to go and tell her folks that she was gay, like openly, really come out to them about it, is what was my understanding. And it's like, Mom, Dad, let me tell you, and that's where end scene. And the thing she was going to tell them was, I'm gay.
I think that probably they were going to be okay with her working in Singapore, because she would be in considerable better proximity than she would have been by going back to the US to work, for example. And also, but at the same time, still be working in an environment which was elevating her above where they were currently living in a lot of respects.
And also not relying on core, which I thought was the big probably thing, is like they're not like the opportunity that there's only 2 mouths to feed, not 3.
Yeah,
and if there's an opportunity,
they were keen for her to have a job of any kind at that point, like, because it taken so long to get a job that they were like, okay.
Talk about when I was angry. It was when they signed her up to work at the uncle's print factory. That was like, no, you're going to go do this job. And I was like, okay, now that I'm pissed off about.
I think that's that.
To be fair, they thought she agreed to it because
the grandmother was
Amma was like, yeah, you can do that when she was in her body.
Right. Yeah. Oh, good point.
Yeah,
but I think kind of the same thing in a way.
Yeah, so it was still worked out to the same sort of thing in the end. I think this ties into the whole non-Kong possession thing and why I was being bothered by it, because it wasn't really just the possession. There was a lot of lack of agency for Jess in that first half, in a lot of things that was happening, in that she just really did not have any choices or control or people listening to her and a lot of the stuff that was going on. And so I think that's why I was just so very upset for so much of it, along with the possession element. I was just like, oh my God, people, will you stop doing this to her?
Yeah. You were going to say something before about I'm sorry, I forgot what it was, but yes.
Yeah, so I was just going to point out from for a family that's come from a traditional, like Malaysian Chinese has seems to have a lot of ties in a traditional Chinese attitude towards girls. I felt her parents were actually very modern. The fact that they even went to America to give their daughter a better life. And I think that they would have made every attempt to have a face that said that they were happy that she was getting a job in Singapore, even though in themselves they probably would have been really sad and devastated. But I think they would have made my feeling is that they would have made a show of, we're really happy for you, because at many levels they probably would be, that if she got a good job.
And in fact, along with that, I would argue that they're also modern because she'd finished university and they hadn't immediately shifted into her getting married.
Yeah.
No. I did wonder also some of the stuff that her mother, like that her mother was pushing on, the few conversations she had with her mother. I actually wondered how much of that was because her mother was back in kind of falling on bad habits. That's not the best way of describing this, but in that she's in an environment where certain things are being highlighted and valued more than maybe if they were still in the States. She might not feel so much pressure or focus on it, because that will impact your parenting and how you behave as well. Like, that's the only visuals. Those are the only visuals we get of her mother is what she's like in that environment, living with her, like living on the favors of her family and stuff. So for all we know, maybe she was always like that in the States too. But I also kind of got the impression that Jess was a real pushover a lot. I was sitting, I'm like, you need, like, she kind of handles her mother a little bit whenever she's about to get into the grab to go meet I call him the Air Asia guy, yeah. But like, she was a real pushover. She didn't push back very much at all, and whether or not she thought she could is a whole other issue, like, whatever. But like, yeah, it's not until the end of the book where she starts just kind of pushing back a lot more.
She got the haircut. That's what made the difference.
It does. Sometimes the haircut will change your life, man. Sometimes.
Yeah. I was just reflecting on something that quote that you read out before, Mel, about where she's Jess's, her mother's saying, I wish we had a relationship like Cor does with her kids. And I was kind of reflecting on that because you were saying, like, well, you keep secrets too, mum, kind of thing. But I was also reflecting on the way we keep meeting this mother who's completely worried about everything, keeps breaking down into tears. And I'm kind of like, so, it's kind of like, why would I share anything when it's made it obvious that you already have too much of an emotional load? Yes. Like that to me was that I thought, and I also had I thought I had an insight, which was Cor's kids all have left, which also is like going, does Cor have the best relationship with her kids? And they've all like gone to other countries to put them away.
Not even just that they've left the house, they've other countries gone.
Yeah.
But see, that's a cultural thing, because in a lot of the times that is viewed as them stepping up in life, and so it's not necessarily viewed as negative for the relationship, but it's viewed as them going forth and doing what I want them to do, which is getting a better life for yourselves.
Yeah, but also,
but it's also easier to avoid conversations with your parents when they're in a different time zone.
Well,
and they're not like.
Sorry, can I just hear what Bobby's trying to say? Sorry.
Coco's daughter was very clear with her mother. She's like, I don't care if you don't like that my friend is gay. He is my best friend. I am going. End of discussion. Hard line, set a boundary, and that's part of having an adult relationship with your parents. Jess was very much in a child-parent relationship for most of this book because it's a coming of age thing. So I think like it's very likely that once as Jess gets more, grows up more and finds herself more and really owns her confidence and stuff, that her mother will get that relationship, because like also adults to adults, you don't share everything. Like, we have secrets from each other. It's not even that I'm keeping a secret. It's like, you didn't need to know that. Like,
it's also,
but I think it's also easier to establish that when you're not living under their roof or even living in the same, I can go back to my
process. Like, you acknowledge your parents are people, they're fallible, and you don't agree on everything, and there are some things that you can't live with. And
because what Jess's mum said was the good relationship wasn't necessarily that they agreed on everything, in that it was that they talked daily. It was that they talked. It wasn't that they agreed on everything and that everything was perfect and lovely. It was that they talked regularly. And she said that that's what she wished that they had, which I thought was interesting, since they were talking daily, but they were obviously not talking, like that's the difference, right? Because
Yeah.
what she meant by that was that she actually says what's actually on her daughter, says what's actually on her mind, and that's what she was trying to say, which didn't necessarily require agreeing on everything.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of what happened with Jess was that, you know, she had to grow up a lot faster, and sort of in her mind, she has to protect her mum, because her mum went through this really traumatic experience of her husband got cancer and almost died, and it was really awful. And that is a very awful experience. I'm not trying to downplay that, but in Jasmine's mind, her mum has a lot on her plate, so she doesn't feel like she can tell her about what's going on with her life. She doesn't feel like she can open up to her, because even though her mum is like, I want you to talk to me, I want you to open up to me, she's like, I know, she thinks she knows that, oh no, if I open up to you, you're just gonna get upset and make it about you.
Yeah, I think
which in fairness is what we saw. I mean, think about her father, who was actually really, really effing happy in his new job. He's like, no, this is exactly what I want.
Talk about this.
I am so happy, but your mother thinks it's a problem, right? And it's because she's got a narrative in her own head about, oh, and he's come down and, you know, they're making him work. And it's like, he's probably told his wife, God knows how many times, but she doesn't want to, you know, like we said, it's like, so exactly what you said, Naomi, it's like, it doesn't matter whether, you know, what she tells her. It's like her mum's going to believe what she wants to believe.
I liked that storyline with the dad where she's all worried about him, like, you know, being exploited. And he's like, I'm just happy to be doing this job where I'm just doing a physical job and I don't have to deal with all the shit. I just do. And I was like, I'm totally there with you, man. Like, doing a
there are
job
no politics. I show up.
Like, I totally get, like, show up, do your fucking job, go home, don't deal with any of the, like, mental stress. And especially after him being sick, I totally saw where he was coming from. And
totally
I think in terms of her, following on from Bobby's point though about adult to adult relationships, like her trying to protect her mum instead of just letting her mum deal with whatever, it feels a bit like, I feel like an adult to adult relationship, you do stand up like Cocoa's daughter, standing up and going, I don't care if you think he's gay, I'm doing this. And kind of like your emotional reaction is really your responsibility on this one, you know, and, you know, I'm going to stand my ground for my integrity. I'm not trying to hurt you or anything, but this is how it is. I think hiding and not sharing is not quite stepping up and having that maturity. So I can kind of see that perspective of, she does need to mature and be prepared to take those little risks, because.
And I think she has like a legacy situation going on where she's been hiding that she's gay for so long that she's gotten very used to hiding things from her mum. So along with that protecting her mum element and all of those sorts of things, and just not being ready to deal with whatever repercussions are going to come from coming out and all of that, because that's a thing. That she's just not sort of reached that stage, and that's part of what the story is about. But
it's all linked. Like, she can't open up to her mum about anything because she can't come out to mum. So all these other elements of her life that are sort of woven in with that, she can't, you know, if she's having relationship issues with her girlfriend, well, she can't talk to mum about that because she hasn't come out to mum, you know. And it's one of those kind of
she's not, if you can't, she's not being,
she can't tell her, so she can't tell her anything.
Exactly,
because she's not being authentic. She can't be her authentic self even with herself. So how can she be her authentic self with her family? Has everyone here seen Turning Red?
Not yet. No, I keep meaning to. It will happen when I get a Disney subscription at some point.
Oh,
don't spoil it.
There's
a lot of parallels there too. Yeah,
there is absolutely, and that's the thing. So it's basically, it's a an only daughter to Chinese immigrant parents to Canada this time, and I just had the dad as the dad in my head, because he's just like, he has this really nice relationship with his daughter, and like they do seem to have a better relationship, and her not wanting to tell him stuff is different to the way that she doesn't want to tell her mother things. Like, it's you know, and then he opens up more to her, and so she's like, oh, okay, you know, all right, I'll tell you a little bit more. So I thought she's reaching that, and I was just really glad. I was like, I'm really glad your dad's there, because I think he is not going to be he's going to understand, and he's going to talk your mum down off the ledge in private. Don't worry.
Can we talk about the Blackwater sister?
Yeah,
sure.
We haven't really brought her up much yet.
Because this is quite late in the book, but when they talk about what makes a god or how someone becomes a god, I was so sad at that point, like talking about how male gods were like, you know, like sort of step up hero type characters who saved a whole lot of people, but female gods are from suffering and horrible deaths. And I'm like, oh.
I was grumpy about that for about 48 hours. I was like, I don't go back to this book. I'm pissed. Just not fair. But
yeah, I wasn't angry so much as terribly sad, because it felt like in supernatural stories that does come up as a thing.
Well, I think that it's also, I think it's something that's tied back to culturally, like, because she's actually done her research for doing all of this, if you read the thing at the back of it all. And I think that culturally that's what's actually represented in that. And so our stories reflect that sort of thing as well, because when our religions are doing that, then that ends up being the stories that we tell and all of that sort of thing. And yeah, that's, you know, it's our usual gendering of situations.
Use of culturally, because like,
oh, I should probably say religiously.
Okay, because I don't feel like that's a trend just for one culture there.
No. I was definitely not meaning to say that it was only this culture that does it. In fact, I was probably meaning generally many cultures do it. But it's this is a particular culture where they've got a lot of active gods that this is very clearly represented as a dichotomy that's there, is what I'm meaning. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist elsewhere at the same time. Of course it does. We're just talking about this one in particular at the moment.
I understood you to mean a lot of different cultures. I was actually just thinking of the Judeo-Christian traditions and the whole Madonna whore stuff, or the Jezebel, or the, you know, Delilah, and it's just like women cannot win in so many religions and cultures, and it's just crap.
Well, the patriarchal ones, if you actually go into the matriarchal,
and I don't know enough about those. Yeah, I don't know enough. Yeah,
rather different and kind of refreshing. But certainly in the more traditional Chinese culture, if you go back a generation or two, I mean, girls just weren't worth very much.
Yeah.
So yeah. But I mean,
this kind of goes back a little bit to She Who Became the Sun. Like, you can see the similar dynamic at the beginning of that book, and how little like a girl's life is worth.
I forgot I chose that last year. I was thinking about it earlier today. I was like, what did I choose last year? But I didn't go look it up. There you go. That's what I chose.
I actually read that one well after it was the chosen book. Yeah. It was good.
I liked our introduction to the Blackwater sister. That was a very cool, like exciting and cool part where she seems
intense.
It was very intense, but I was really like, and then she was rushing, like she possessed a workman, and then the accent and the accident, I should say. Sorry, that's what I meant to say. But yeah, I was like, wow, okay, cool. I didn't quite see where it was going.
Where she was standing outside the door, the glass.
That freaked the bejesus out of me.
I was like,
if they ever make a movie of this, I won't be able to watch it.
Not that scene.
I kept picturing the chick from The Ring. That was what I saw, like in my
mind. That's kind of thing I was picturing as well.
I'm gone. I go, this is not me.
But I like that the author someone help me. Thank you. With a bit of comedy from Korkor, because that was great. It's like, in the name of Jesus Christ. I was like, thank God for Korkor. She's bringing the comedy the whole time through the book. I love it. Thank God she's here.
That was like
I did love the auntie. I loved Korkor.
As much as you get frustrated with her, she was just good fun to have there in the story.
She really was. And with those intense moments, like that moment, and with the monkey god and all of those, like, thank God she's scared, because that sounds so full
just
on.
generally, obviously, a very kind person too, to let them come and live with her, and not ram it
such
down
a butterfly.
their throats.
She's everybody
You're
around.
living with
Everyone wants to
us,
be
you
the
know,
cuckoo.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was
But
cool.
yes, some absolutely fantastic horror vibes happening there.
Yeah.
And I'm not a
Yeah.
horror person.
I still can't quite believe I picked this book
Yeah.
sometimes.
I had a moment though where, you know, when she possessed the workman and then the building collapses and the workman's still okay, that it's like, oh, the Blackwater sister didn't actually mean to hurt the workman specifically. That wasn't the motive.
She's
So-
just trying to make things stop. And
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a parallel with Amma, who's not necessarily trying to hurt Jess. She's just trying to achieve what she wants to
the
achieve.
means to an end.
Mm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she doesn't
Yeah.
always think through the next step either, I feel like.
Yeah, yeah,
Because to her, she lives in a particular world, like where
Mm.
you shouldn't have ramifications for what somebody else did while possessing you, and yet this world is not going to let you off for that. Like, seriously.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
so
she's not
that
going to
is-
just be able to be like, oh, well, a ghost was possessing me. That's why I murdered that person.
Mm,
That'll totally work. And
Not going to happen in work in a court of law.
Mm.
No.
But I did like the fact that the possession that happened when she was Amma was trying to have Jess hurt Shrang.
Yep.
Shenang?
Yeah.
Asia.
Erasure.
Yeah.
Erasure.
That I really felt like that was the first moment where Jess was starting to feel her Wheaties as well, because she was fighting back and she was actually getting somewhere with that. And I was like, yeah, you go, you can be strong, you can make your own choices.
That
Yeah.
one was so well written. I mean, like, the intense parts were all really well written, but that one actually made me really upset. And Sarah, this is like harkening back to 4 years ago or something, when I did my first book pick. It was a similar thing. The book I picked had an omnipresent, like omniscient character that would basically possess and get people to do things, right? It was the narrative structure, the fairy tale narrative, and like people who had certain characteristics would kind of become a character and would lose all sense of stuff. And that did not bother me so much. I mean, like, it was dark and stuff, but listening to the book, the way it was written did not upset me so much as that scene in this book. And I was actually curious how you reacted, because I know that the book I picked, that Sean McGuire book, really upset you. And so I was curious how you handled this one, how you felt about that scene with.
I was interesting. I thought you were going to refer to
what-
something else there. Yeah. What was the book that you picked?
Indexing,
So I've-
and it was indexing.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Because
I
the
remember
Pied
that.
Piper character was, she
Yeah.
could see what was going on and she didn't like it. Like, and it was upsetting for her and her.
Yeah. So it was interesting. You were just talking about referencing something else, because the whole possession thing, and I realized I've got better with it, but it was maybe also from a religious and cultural point of view, from a Chinese culture point of view. Is, do you guys remember when I basically had to have a bit of a vent about the movie The Farewell?
I never saw it.
Okay, so I had a bit of a vent to you guys. I watched it and I was really annoyed and upset with it, because but this is exactly why I think the filmmaker has made it, because it's
maybe
about,
I do remember this.
Aquafina. Did I say that right? Aquafina?
Mm.
Right, yeah. She plays an American Chinese woman who is caught between two cultures, and she goes back with her family to basically there to say farewell to the grandmother, but what they haven't done is told the grandmother that she's dying. So they all think that they're there for a wedding. They haven't given, yeah. I know, right? So I was incredibly angry about this, because everybody just is complicit with it and said, well, this is the way things are done, including the doctor who went over to Yale and trained and went back. And the thing that I remember saying was, I'm so annoyed with this, because it's about body autonomy. And as women, we have so often don't get autonomy over our own bodies. And this is like the worst thing, is that they don't tell her that she's dying. They don't give her any options. They've made up, like, it just made me very angry, obviously. And I was like, well, this is because that's exactly what the character's like grappling with. Was this like, is this just a Western point of view? Coming up against this Eastern philosophy. And, I was like, well, it might be Western, but I'm also just like, as we keep talking about in a lot of, in some of the books we've read, there is this like women are not valued and their bodies are not their own, etc. And we see this in this book. So reading this, I was getting real parallel vibes with this. Seems to be a theme, and it's really awesome that we're getting lots of people, but people are exploring this as like, this is problematic, this is an issue, and there's lots of different ways to look into it. So I wasn't as freaked out by it. And also, yes, because she's fighting it, and then she's like, it's like telling us like, yeah, this is wrong. And as we learn more about those two characters of both Ma and what her purposes are, and the Blackwater sister and her background, we get there's a lot more complexity, which I really liked. It's sort of threaded into it. And it's also because it's women possessing women, which I thought was kind of, I don't know, that's sort of, you know, if it had been a male god doing it, we probably would be all up in arms. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think that it would have been.
I was pissed because I was like, this.
There was a male god possessing. Oh, sorry, Bobby. Go.
So what that scene was in the temple where Akun and Ama had colluded together to be able to, so that Ama could possess Jess. That scene, I was so pissed at the fact that it was an elder. So in a situation where that person still had some sort of hierarchical power over her, and basically taking who I was viewing as a child and forcing them to commit homicide.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, that was the midpoint, and that was where the whole tone changed to me, and that's where I was saying from that point, I was like, this is no longer like, you know, detective literature with a slightly supernatural. Now we're in thriller supernatural bent, like darkness. I think they're just Shauna, or is it Sean?
Shonen.
I found the whole thing quite dark, and that's probably, which is weird because, you know, I love me some Seven, some Mindhunter, but I don't know what it was about reading it. It's just like, anyway.
All right, guys, are we good to wrap it up?
Yeah.
Alrighty then.
I have one last comment. I was impressed by the number of references to Milo.
Yes, I must admit,
I really had a Milo
that.
as my drink tonight, and then I was like, no, I really want a glass of wine. But I was like,
if I'd had Milo, I would have.
I was like, and I was glad the audio person said Milo, because I've heard Americans call it Milo, and that just rubs me the wrong way. And I was like,
that
I didn't realize Milo was that popular in Malaysia, but clearly it is. And I was enjoyed
I have no idea why they would say that, because Milo, M-I-L-O, that's actually how you spell the name Milo for like
I know,
like a strong man.
People call it Milo, and I'm like, I don't understand.
Sounds like they've
American, and I think that's dumb. Like,
Novi, what did you say? I missed it.
Yeah.
I think.
Okay, that was a little bit ago, but all right, guys. Did we do the swapping thing? I have to remember which book we're reading.
We're reading A Magic Steeped in Poison by Judy L. Eileen.
Okay, in March. Next book.
Tomorrow before that, on the 31st.
Oh, yes, thank you. Yes, excellent. Okay, thank you, everybody who was watching. Hope you had a good time. Bye.